All right, guys. Good evening. I'm Steve Rabinowitz. That is Jay Kaplan, Anthony Strait, and Joe Tufaro joining us as we get into the football portion of the year, or the football portion of 2025. Welcome to a show that will not include the following names this week: Joy Taylor, Skip Bayless, Hulk Hogan, Brian Dayball, Doug Peterson, Kirk Herbstreit, Jameis Winston, or Bailey Zappi. It is the best of the
Uh,
best.
sorry,
I'm
Rob.
not.
Aaron Rodgers. How about
Are
Herb's
Aaron
you
Rodgers?
really going to include Bailey Zappi? It was the final
no,
week of the
but I
season.
am good. But I do have Herb Street. So sorry, you can't go perfect
Oh
game there.
God, it's all right. I'm sorry. Doug Peterson, Greg McElroy, Jameis Winston, or Bailey Zappi. My apologies. It's the best of the best. It's the On the Sports Lines wild card and CFP Finals edition. Welcome to 2025. Hold your applause and champagne. We don't have the time or money for either of those things. Anyway, Joe Tafaro is joining us tonight from the Official Review podcast, a fine podcast that posts on every Monday and is hosted by a certain someone over here. Anyway, we're going to talk about the college football playoff and rant a little bit tonight about the SEC. But first, it's time to the pros to do that playoff thing. It's like the CFP, except with two extra teams and two less buys. They can actually win. Let's go through a un-super wild card weekend. They dropped the super, which I really, really like. Anyway, we'll start with the AFC. Five teams representing two divisions in their bracket. There's two in the North and three in the West, although the Chiefs have that bye, so it's really just two in the West for this weekend. But there's only one lonely East and South team. Womp womp. We'll start with that one lonely South team as hosting the 4:30 p.m. Eastern game and playoff opener for their eighth consecutive postseason is the Houston Texans. They, of course, made the playoffs all 8 times. By the way, in the divisional round, they've had all 4 spots in the divisional round time slot wise. But wild card weekend, 4:30 Saturday. It's tradition, 100% accuracy. They host the Los Angeles Chargers back in the playoffs after a 1 year absence, but replacing their incompetent coach, a very competent one in Jim Harbaugh, who's been around the block a time or two or three or four before. Anthony, give me a player to watch from each team between the Texans and Chargers. And no, we didn't give you this game just because it's the Nickelodeon one, but I feel like that probably had something to do with it.
Yeah,
Well, I'm
so
always blessed.
yeah,
I know. As long as we know who's done this show, I've always been blessed to have the Nickelodeon telecast. But also, this is a tradition that's like going up. It's on the level of the Masters with the Texans having a 4:30 Saturday playoff game. It's like
Tradition looked
at
like
some
any
point,
other.
maybe it's payback for them wearing those Houston Oilers jerseys over the weekend just to kind of troll. I mean, that was just awful. But I'm starting with the home teams and both my angles. So the player to watch for the hometown Texans is CJ Stroud. And coming off a rookie season where he threw for 4,100 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions, you're thinking the sky's the limit for a young man that had all the potential in the world, all the athleticism, and clearly show that he can play on the big stage. That includes one playoff win last year, while Cole went over the Cleveland Browns. However, this season, obviously, if you watch the Texans, even a few games this year, he's taking a step back. Some of it because of injuries, no Stephon Diggs. He lost Nico Collins for a few games. Take Dell, he lost unfortunately around the Christmas holiday in Kansas City. Just a devastating knee injury on a end zone pass. So that's been part of it. But also he's not making the big plays as well, and his accuracy has been down. This season, he's dropped down to just 19 touchdowns. His interceptions gone up to 12. He's only thrown for 36.77 far through the air, but also his completion percentage is also dipped to 62.7% and at 86 passer rating. Last year, he had a passer rating over 100. Now, maybe this is the game where a Texans team that relies really mostly on their defense and the running game with Joe Mixon's over 1,000 yards, finished over 1,000 yards this season. Maybe they try to take the load off of a guy who has regressed a little bit, considering the defense is going to go up against. Um, but CJ Stroud is a guy that has played in big games. Remember last season with the division title on the line in Indianapolis? the wild card game against Cleveland. Even his performance in Baltimore in the divisional round was sometimes be a loss. CJ Stroud played stellar in all three of those games. They need the CJ Stroud of last season to come back this year, even if it's to get them past the Chargers, if they want to advance. And on the Chargers end, I'm going to look at the other quarterback. That's Justin Herbert. Now, uh, Jay, you are very familiar with Jim Harbaugh and how he loves to coach his team. Fundamentally sound football, take care of the football, pound the rock, solid defense. The Chargers have literally transformed into a Jim Harbaugh-X team compared to what we see from the last 2 years. And Justin Herbert's stats has actually reflected that. When you look at this year, he's only thrown for 3870, and 23 touchdowns, but just 3 interceptions the entire season. That 23-3 touchdown ratio is ranked 8th all time in NFL history. And that's among quarterbacks with at least 15 touchdown passes in a season. He's coming to the playoffs, kind of been over a hot streak. He started the season with a 90-plus passing rate in the first 10 games, the longest streak of his career. And from week 12 to 14, he's recorded 357 consecutive attempts without an interception. That's the 5th longest streak in the NFL. In week 17, with the playoff berth on the line in New England, he threw for 281 to become the 3rd player in NFL history to throw for at least 3,000 yards and 20 touchdowns in each of his first 5 seasons. But this is a team, without question, that is both teams are really built on their defenses, and both have weaknesses. For the Texans, their offense has been very inconsistent. Injuries have a lot to do with it. A shaky offensive line has had something to do with that as well. For the Chargers, it's inconsistency when you look at a tale of two halves. In the second half of games, they've only averaged 10.3 points per game, which is 19th in the NFL. So it's going to come down to 2 days in this game. It's going to come down to the turnover battle. You got a Texas team that take the ball away, they're 5th most in the NFL, against a Chargers team that just don't turn the ball over, going up against a quarterback who has become more turnover prone this season compared to last year, as he's been forced to take more chances downfield. Also, it's going to come down to a battle of defenses and possessions, and obviously playing the shorter field for both teams, because obviously the Chargers don't make mistakes. And when you have a young quarterback like CJ Stroud, you're basically hoping that he doesn't make that key error, and that's to put Texas in a bad situation where they may actually beat themselves. So that's the 2 days it's going to come down to. But obviously, it's going to be the 2 quarterbacks that's under the microscope, and who makes the fatal mistake that could cost their team, especially in probably a mirror image of one another, considering how these 2 teams have gone through this season.
Yep.
I think the one thing that I've noticed about just the Texans this year, you realize they've only won 2 games by double digits this entire season. They've had some close losses. That Detroit loss is really something that you would think about way back in week 10. But this Houston team is not even close to the same team. And honestly, the only reason that they're here is because literally everybody else in the division was so bad this year that they had to fire somebody in order to make their division, or to make their team better. And interestingly enough, Herbert is now down for the 3rd straight year in pass yards per game. This year it's for 27.6, but that quarterback rating is now up to its highest number. I think Herbert is a very good player. And again, all he needed was the right guidance. And someone like a J.J. McCarthy could be really good in the NFL just because what Herbert has done with this Chargers team. By the way, it also helps when you get a very good young receiver from Georgia. Who knew getting people from Georgia helps out your team? Because Ladd McConkey has been one of the best wide receivers in the NFL already. Could easily be a Rookie of the Year nominee, although that's probably going to Jaden Daniels, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Meanwhile, we're going to go chronologically to a nasty division rivalry. And when you think that, you think the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens have nabbed this division for the 2nd straight year with the arm of Lamar Jackson and the legs of Derrick Henry, taking it away from the Steelers, who were on top of the North pile for most of the season, but 4 straight losses, including one 18 days ago, puts Pittsburgh behind the proverbial 8 ball and into Charm City. Jay, give me a player from each team to watch on this Saturday night showdown, which Steelers fans will have to actually remember is on the streaming service.
Yes, we are painfully aware of that. And Rabbi, it's kind of interesting that you used the phrase "behind the 8 ball" when the Ravens player to watch wears number 8, and that of course would be quarterback Lamar Jackson. And for these are a couple for the Steelers, it's TJ Watt. I mean, there are a couple of captain obvious picks, but they are the focal points of the 2 units that will likely decide the winner of this 3rd meeting of the season between these 2 AFC North rivals who really do not like each other. For the number 3 seed Baltimore Ravens, so as the 3 seed goes up against the 6 seed. We'll start with Lamar. Put up a season that would in any other year make him the runaway NFL MVP, but this year Buffalo's Josh Allen may have something to say about it. 66.7% completion percentage, 4,172 yards passing, 8.8 yards per attempt, number 1 in the NFL. 41 touchdown passes, 4 interceptions, 119.6 passer rating, also led the NFL. He had 915 rushing yards, led the NFL with 6.6 yards per carry, and had 4 TDs on the ground. The passing yards, passing TDs, interceptions, and his 0.8 interception percentage were career bests among his seasons where he has been the full-time starter. Those 4 picks were the fewest interceptions by a quarterback with 40 touchdowns in NFL history. The rushing yards were the 3rd most ever for a quarterback, and he became the first player in NFL history to throw for 4,000 yards and rush for at least 800 in a single season. Baltimore's offense became the first in NFL history with over 4,000 passing yards and over 3,000 rushing yards in the same season. Obviously, most of that coming from Jackson and, as Rabbi said at the top, Derrick Henry. Ravens have topped 3,000 yards rushing 3 times in the Jackson era, the only team to do so multiple times. The 3,189 they put up this year, 3rd most in NFL history. They're 5.8 yards per carry, 2nd most all time, trailing the 1948 San Francisco 49ers and ahead of Jim Brown's 1963 Cleveland Browns. There's 727,224 yards of total offense, 3rd most in NFL history, one of 5 teams to top the 7,000-yard mark. There are 6.8 average yards per play, is also 3rd highest in NFL history, behind the 2000 Rams, a.k.a. the greatest show on turf, and the 2018 Patrick Mahomes Chiefs. The Steelers have historically had Jackson's number, however, and the Ravens, and this season was no different. Prior to the Week 16 win, Baltimore had lost 8 of their last 9 games against Pittsburgh, and Jackson's Week 11 numbers were decidedly un-MVP-like. The Week 16 win was more like what we're used to seeing from Jackson. In Week 11, where they lost 18-16, he completed his 48.5% of his passes for 207 yards, 6.3 per attempt, 1 score, 1 pick. His passer rating was 66.1, 4 carries, 46 yards. That's it. Week 16, 34-17 victory, 65.2% completion percentage, same 207 yards, but 9 yards an attempt, 3 touchdowns against 1 pick, and a 115 passer rating. Not only does Jackson have to change the narrative how he's historically played against the Steelers, against whom he has just a 3-5 record, has completed only 58% of his passes for just 160.5 passing yards per game, 6.8 per attempt, 8 touchdowns against 9 interceptions. He's been sacked 23 times. His passer rating is just 73.1. He's also fumbled 8 times, losing 3 of them. Pittsburgh is the only team that Jackson has thrown more interceptions than touchdowns against. But he also needs to change the narrative of how he plays like an MVP during the regular season, but an abject LVP during the postseason, where he's 2-4, 57.4% completion percentage, just 220.7 passing yards per game, only a 6.8 yards per attempt, 6 scores, 6 picks. He's been sacked 26 times in those 6 games. He has a 75.7% passer rating. He's also fumbled 6 times, losing 3. Now, Jackson is the only quarterback in NFL history with multiple MVPs to not win a Super Bowl. Since 2018, and among quarterbacks with at least 5 postseason starts, he has the NFL's 4th best regular season record, 70-24, but is tied for the worst postseason mark of 2-4. In the playoffs, he's produced as many turnovers, 9 on 6 picks and 3 fumbles, as touchdowns. He's averaged one turnover every 83 snaps in the regular season. In the postseason, that drops to one turnover every 45 snaps. In his 4 playoff losses, the Ravens have averaged only 10.5 points per game and have not topped the 20-point mark. The loss to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in last season's AFC title game on the heels of a 13-4 regular season that saw the team dominate the league on both sides of the ball and Jackson win that second MVP was the most soul-crushing. Now, there's a very good chance that Jackson will have to take on both Allen and Mahomes in their houses in order to get to his first Super Bowl. If so, he'll have to play like an MVP in order to do so. But that road and the changing of his postseason narrative starts against his number one nemesis and the Pittsburgh Steelers and TJ Watt. Now, it's a much-used storyline. The Steelers have one of the highest-paid defenses in the NFL, but what has it gotten them? They haven't reached the AFC title game since 2017, have lost 5 straight playoff games since 2016. Watt is the linchpin of this defense, and as he goes, so goes the Steelers, as they're 2-10 when he doesn't play, as opposed to 77-30 when he does. And he's been on the roster for each of the last 4 playoff losses, though he was inactive for last year's loss to Buffalo in the wildcard round due to a knee injury. If the Steelers are going to snap this season-ending 4-game losing streak and this 5-game skid in the postseason, it'll start with their defense, which means it starts with Watt. Now, compared to his game-wrecking 2023 season, where he led the NFL with 19 sacks and finished second in the voting for Defensive Player of the Year, 2024 was a down year for the 4-time first-team All-Pro. 61 tackles, only 11.5 sacks, only 19 tackles for losses, only 27 quarterback hits, only 31 quarterback pressures. He did lead the NFL with 6 fumbles forced. Now, in his career against Baltimore, which is basically a full season, 16 games, 75 tackles, 22 for loss, 17 sacks, 33 quarterback hits, 4 forced fumbles, and the Steelers are 11-5 in those 16 games. And as I noted in the previous segment, prior to the Week 16 loss, Pittsburgh had taken 8 of the previous 9, and watch numbers in the Week 11 win versus the Week 16 loss, which was the first time since December of 2019 that a game between these two had been decided by more than one score, show how much the Steelers need him to be a factor. In the win, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss, a pair of quarterback hits, and a pair of quarterback pressures. In the Week 16 loss, no sacks, no tackles for losses, no quarterback hits, no quarterback pressures, overall 0 impact. The problem is that over the last 3 games to close out the regular season, all losses obviously, Watt has not been a factor in any shape, manner, or form. 0 sacks across all 3 games, 0 quarterback hits, 0 pressures, forced fumbles, and only 1 tackle for loss. And that was one of the NFL's best defenses prior to this 4-game losing streak has looked anything but as the playoffs loom. Through the first 13 games, they held teams to 18.3 points and 310.2 yards and were plus 17 in turnover differential, which was tied for first in the NFL. Since 27 points per game allowed, almost 381 yards per game allowed, and they're minus 1 in turnover differential. They've had a plethora of missed assignments and communication issues which have led to a number of big plays given up. Steelers are still tied for the NFL lead with 33 takeaways, but they managed only 5 during this losing streak after forcing 3 in each of the 4 games before the loss to Philly, which started this skid. Now, those counting stats paint not so sunny a picture, and the next-gen stats don't improve the outlook much. Overall, the Steelers' defense is solid, 7th in efficiency and EPA, but it's not the elite level we're used to seeing, and this shows most glaringly against the pass. They're just 17th in sacks, 18th in sacks per opponent's drop back, and 20 in sack rate. Only 7 teams have allowed more passing yards than their 228 a game. And how much of this is related to Watt being banged up and playing through an ankle injury sustained in the loss to Philly can be debated, though the previously mentioned decline in his production started after that loss. But the net result is the same. This defense has gotten worse as the season has gone on, ranking 17th in both efficiency and EPA since Week 12. Now, this isn't the first time the Steelers have entered the playoffs on a losing streak. In '96, they lost their final 2, but beat the Colts in the wild card before losing to the Patriots in the divisional round. And as recently as 2020, they lost 4 of their final 5 and didn't make it past the wild card round, losing to Cleveland. None of this bodes well for Saturday night's rubber match with the arch-rival Ravens in Baltimore. Now, there is a prevailing theory among some diehard Steeler fans that if TJ Watt had been able to play in last year's wildcard game against the Bills, the Steelers' postseason losing streak would have ended. He'll be in the lineup on Saturday. And even if Russell Wilson and the offense are able to rediscover their midseason mojo, it'll more than likely be TJ Watt in the defense to determine if the streak ends this year.
Would diehard Steeler fans, by the way, include just yourself, or do you have your ear to the street that actually can say that most diehard Steeler fans?
I have my ear to the street, and
you have your sources.
I have my sources. I am not the only fan who believes that it was possible, But look, when you had the type of game-wrecking season that he had last year, it's only natural to think that the outcome might have been different if he'd been able to play.
Funny thing is, the last 3 games that TJ Watt has played, Steelers have allowed 40 points in each of those 3 games. And in the 4 games, I mean, not counting the Buffalo game included, last 4 games, they've been outscored in the first half 56-0.
Yep.
It's not good. But for Lamar Jackson, and Joe is a card-carrying member of the Josh Allen MVP club, as we'll talk about in just a moment. Note this. Yes, he's a multi-time MVP, but Peyton Manning didn't win his first Super Bowl until he was 30, and he was already by far a multi-time MVP when that moment happened. However, let's see what the breakthrough happens for Lamar Jackson going into this weekend. It's almost like this is like the preschool class going into what could be the honor roll classes of Allen and Mahomes. And if he doesn't make it through preschool, he is going to get burned over the coals. Before we continue here, happy anniversary to the Buffalo Bills. This is the 25th anniversary of the Music City Miracle. Congratulations. One of the worst moments in Buffalo Bills history. You're going to love that. I'm going to go right to this. The AFC finally has the opening 3 games of the weekend, and the last one of those 3 games is in Buffalo as the Bills host the Broncos. The last time the Denver Broncos were in the playoffs was 9 years ago, and they experienced the joy of a victory in Super Bowl 50. Now rookie QB Bo Nix heads to Buffalo, where despite a 13-4 season for the Bills, the joy of the postseason has non-existent for the Bills Mafia. Joe, give me the players to watch on each side.
Yeah, pretty standard picks here. I think it's the quarterbacks on each side. Bo Nix, obviously, because he's inexperienced and, we don't know what he's going to be like on this big stage. He played some decently sized games in college, but nothing like this. Never really made it to any place that would rival this. But he does have a fantastic coach behind him who, again, as we talked about the other day, it's, you're running his system and that's what it is. So even though, like we said, some coaches will say, or they'll say some coordinators will go, oh, we sat down with the quarterback and asked him what plays he'd like to run. They go, that doesn't happen with Sean Payton. You run his system.
It's so limited.
Yeah, you wind up in Pittsburgh. That's what happens to you if you don't run John's system. So it'll be interesting because, he had a decent year, threw for just under 4,000 yards, but had 100 rushes for 4.7 yard average. He was actually the 3rd leading rusher on the team, and actually the highest per carry average out of 100 carries, which is a lot. It's a significant number. So he knows what to do. He knows to look for those. And Jay and I talk about this all the time. He knows to look for the first 2 reads and then get the heck out of there. And that's what's going to be the biggest plus for him was his mobility. How much can he do? How much can he make? How many first downs can he pick up on his own? Just gives you a little bit more option against Buffalo. And, again, I don't think the old days of the Buffalo Bills weigh too heavy on this group. Obviously, the fans have all been there forever, and they know that they can't win in the playoffs or they can't win the Super Bowl or whatever it is that they can't do. They've never tasted that championship. But I don't think it weighs too much on these players. And you'll see that again. It'll be on Josh Allen's shoulders. And the only thing you got to worry about with Josh is, does he return to old Josh if suddenly they're down 10, 12, 14 points somewhere along the line? Yeah. Does he turn into interception Josh? Does he turn into force the ball Josh? Or does he stay with what he's done this year, which has been very good, throwing the ball away, punting the ball, taking the old adage of a kick at the end of any series is a good series, and just go out and play. And again, he does put it on himself a lot. He's run run some fantastic plays this year. He will run with the ball still. He'll dive and do somersaults and do everything he can for this team to help them win. But he's not reckless about it to the point where that's all he does. He's really come a long way, gets the ball out of his hands quick. They have a good running game that they use a lot, and they use him in it as part of it, which gives you all those options down on the goal line, down in the red zone, where they've been fantastic this year, of how many different options do you actually have. And when you add him back into that mix, even with the backwards lateral, hook and lateral play that wasn't called, you can, and I still think if that wasn't in the snow, they might have called forward progress on the wide
It
receiver.
probably would have,
Yeah.
actually. They did it last weekend, too. When
Yeah, it was kind of an odd play because of the snow and everybody slipping around. But either way, the fact that he was there, able to do that, just shows you his commitment to this team, that pretty much he's going to do whatever he can to make it happen. So we had a little disagreement, Rabbi and I don't think this is going to be, I think this could be a close game because Buffalo doesn't usually play too many games where they blow people out. I don't know what the weather's going to be. I don't think it's going to hurt either team because of where Denver comes from. But it could affect how the game's played and if the wind and all that kind of stuff, if they're not able to throw the ball as well as they'd like to. So I think we decided it could be a blowout either way, or it could be like a toss-up, which is what I think it's going to turn out to be. I think the Broncos play well for the first half, and then it starts to get a little bit out of their reach as Buffalo continues to convert in the red zone, 3 points, 7 points, 3 points, 7 points. They usually get points on the board when they get their hands on the ball, and that's going to be a key to this whole thing. So I hope it's a good game. I think it could be the best game of Saturday, because I think it could be one of the closer ones just because of all the elements. And again, when you have a coach finally, like we see in San Diego or LA, whatever the hell they're called, when you see good coaches take over teams, put their stamp on it, and have everybody understand whose plan you're playing under, it seems to get them best. Harbaugh's take almost the exact same team minus 2 wide receivers and made them into a playoff team in San Diego, in LA, because they were already. They just didn't have a coach that could manage to figure that out. Let's call timeout. Don't take the time.
The Brandon Staley principle always works sometimes, and it doesn't really work in the NFL.
Yeah.
So a couple of things about Josh Allen. By the way, 6 interceptions this year, which is a third of what he had a year ago when he had 18. And the 6 were the 4th fewest in the NFL this year. And he had an offense that is the first ever to score 30 passing and 30 rushing touchdowns in the same season, which is insane. Now, one thing I noticed when doing my research, and yes, I actually do research for this show, shockingly enough. I do research for all of my shows. I just don't show it sometimes. But I noticed that I've looked at the Bills' opening round history, and I have decided that Bo Nix is possibly the best opening round quarterback that they've ever faced. Listen to the 4 quarterbacks that they have faced in the last 4 years, because I've won the East all those years, so they've been able to host at least the first round playoff game. In 2020, they got the last game of the career of Phillip Rivers as a Colt. In 2021, they got rookie Mac Jones. Where is he now? In 2022, they got Skylar Thompson, and that's a name that no one will ever actually remember or care about. And in 2023, they had Mason Rudolph. And so when you compare that to Bo Nix, that's like caviar to 4 Happy Meals going into there. That is just insane to look. Obviously, the competition gets a little bit harder when you get to round 2, but round 1, and they've struggled in some of these games. Like the Pittsburgh game last year was a dogfight. The Miami game that year before was a dogfight. The Indy game was a dogfight. So I expect this to be a little bit closer than people think.
Yeah, by the way, I remember earlier this year, I've been impressed with Bo Nix, his progression throughout the season. I was at that game at MetLife against the Jets, and Bo Nix passing yards took like Happy Gilmore's scorecard on the back 9. It was god awful. And the Broncos still managed to win that game, in part because they got a tremendously good defense that gets overlooked. That secondary led by Patrick Surtain II really knows how to take the ball away. And that's going to be key, because if they're forcing Josh Allen into making some mistakes, and he's been prone to do that in playoff games, This game could be a lot closer than people are may give it credit for. And it doesn't. And Bo Nix has really opened the game, opened up the passing. Sean Payton and Joe Lombardi has really kept things simple for Knicks as he's come along this year. But yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be a close game. And considering, as Rabbi mentioned, the Bills, even when a beatable opponent, have struggled in these opening round games at home. So
these rounds are tough for them for some reason. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, you'd definitely be interested come Sunday.
But Joe, from what I have read, there have been the odd occasions where Bo Nix has actually stood up to Sean Payton as the season has worn on.
Not true.
He got more comfortable in the offense to basically say, he's become a lot more confident in voicing his opinion on certain play calls. Whether that has convinced Sean to change his mind may be another story, but he has found his voice as the quarterback of this offense.
Yeah, and what I like about, and again, we talked about this before, is that's great because it's still coming from within that system. So if you have this singular approach of this is the offense we run, this is how you do this is how you execute this. Again, you can call a couple of different things, and he can again give his plans, but again, it's not coming from, hey, when I was in Green Bay, I used to run this. Now we're going to run it here.
Yes.
It's coming. He's not saying, hey, we ran this in Oregon, and Sean's going, yeah, that's nice. We don't do that here. This is what you can choose from these 5,000 plays that I have. But you don't come in telling me about something where you did something else. So
right. And, Anthony, you brought up the Jets game, and yeah, it was probably we talked about it on the show. It was one of the worst passing, performances by a quarterback in NFL history. But that's kind of where
that's the game. So obviously both sides definitely happens.
That's kind of where the season turned for Nix, because from that point onward, his season just went in an upward trajectory each week as he got more and more comfortable and more confident in that offense. And it kind of proved to the rest of and it did prove to the NFL that when Sean Payton has the quarterback that he wants, good things happen.
Okay. Well, one that will learn.
Yes, that's the key. One that'll learn. But by the way, it on film that Nix was a guy who would fit his scheme, and look, and we talk about that all the time. Having the right quarterback for the scheme that you run is all in the NFL.
And they talked to Sean the other day, and because they asked him about the draft pick, and he said, "Hey, we went to his pro day, and then we had him the next day, and he said, I've never seen such an accurate passer." He goes, and to me, that's what I want. He said, I want the guy who 5, 10, 15 yards is accurate. He said, the rest of the stuff is showboat stuff that you can throw at 80 yards because you don't have to be on target. You just have to kind of be it in the area or try to throw it over the correct shoulder. But when you're throwing it 5 yards, 3 yards, 7 yards, you better be accurate. And he said, I didn't realize how big he was because he doesn't look that big in those bright yellow uniforms out in Oregon.
No.
And he said he was amazingly accurate. He goes, we all looked at each other in the car and said, are you kidding me? This kid should be at the top. And they did their homework and got the right pick.
Yeah.
7 games of
he probably wouldn't have fit anywhere other than this offense with this coach.
Well, 7 games of an over 100 quarterback rating this year, including the last 3, albeit 2 of them were losses, and 1 of them they played the 4th string of Kansas City. But we'll see what happens going into this weekend. All right. Guys, close your eyes, click your heels 3 times and say, there's no place like the NFC. There's no place like the NFC. There's no place like the NFC. And in it, you'll find a Kansas tornado-sized bracket of Anthony's favorite word, doom. 3 14-win teams, a 7 seed that's 11-6, and a guarantee of a new NFC champion. The Niners didn't even make it. The NFC runners-up from 2023, the Detroit Lions, unfortunately for Dan Campbell, are forced to sit players this week because they don't actually have a game to play. Sorry, Dan. I know you're mentally playing in your mind, but that game doesn't count. You'll play next weekend. Joe, we'll go back to you as we start with the 2nd-seeded Eagles and the 7th-seeded Packers. Way back in week number 1 in Brazil, the home team in the Eagles beat the Packers 34-29. The game was in Brazil. Nobody was allowed to wear green. you know the deal. Over 4 months later, the Packers didn't lose a single game out of division except that one, except they're 1-5 in their division. Now the 14-3 Eagles are hosting this game again in Philadelphia, not Brazil. Not sure which one is more hostile though. Anyway, Joe, there are some former Giants in this one. Are there going to be any of your players to watch here?
No, no.
Good.
I think
I'm glad.
even though everybody would say, okay, we'll see what I think it all ties together. What Barkley does is tied together to is Jalen Hurts going to be healthy? And we talk about this ad nauseum all year long between when we text each other, when we're on shows together. We talk about the fact that they still think their quarterback is indestructible. And by the end of last year, and now by the end of this year, it's been the same exact thing. Yeah, he looks great first few games. In the middle, struggles a little bit, gets better, and then all of a sudden he can't walk. And you wonder why, why are we still running every fourth down and every third and short through the quarterback when you have a future Hall of Fame running back now that you went out and bought and got for this specific purpose? That you would think that they would turn around and give him the ball a little bit more than they do. And so now his pinky's hurt, his legs hurt, he's done stuff. So who knows? And he's not the most accurate guy as it is. So if his hand is hurting at this point, how's that going to turn into it? Philadelphia has a fantastic offense. They have 3 great wide receivers. They have a great running back. But we all know what happens when your quarterback doesn't perform up to snuff. See Dallas Cowboys. We're going to see what this is. Is he healthy enough to even play? Again, we start seeing stuff come out. You'll start seeing it today and tomorrow about how he's not practicing, and where do they go? They don't have really anybody else behind him. So, of course, you could run Wildcat because that's basically what their offense is anyway. They just run the quarterback all day long. But the Packers are not quite as dominant as the old Packers used to be, and Jordan Love has struggled lately. He makes some good throws. He's very good deep throws. He doesn't quite have all the weapons he needs in this one. They don't have a great running back. They don't have great wide receivers. They have some decent ones and Dobbs and those guys, but it's not quite that cast of characters that they've had over the past few years when Rodgers was there and then when he was coming through. So I don't think this game's really going to be all that close. I don't think Green Bay can hang with them too long in the second half because even though Hurts may be out or not be playing well, they still have a very, very good running game. And I think once they take a lead, it's very hard to catch Philadelphia. And I don't see Green Bay being that successful. They haven't been that great in the red zone this year. So I just think that this game may get out of hand. This one might be one where you don't have to watch the fourth quarter at least and sort of take it from there.
Good, so I can eat dinner then if that's the case. Yeah. But I think actually what I've talked about, and I actually talked about this on Monday, I think Philadelphia is a very flawed team. By the way, I've never seen the phrase when, because Jalen Hurts has been concussion/left finger. Pick one, all right? There's got to be, you can't have multiple injuries in that situation. But anyway, Philly's been a very up and down team. I feel like they've been a more up and down team for a 14-3 team than you would like. I do think what I've seen from Philly, at least what I've seen from Hurts this year, seems to be a little bit better. But I do think if they get off to a rough start, because remember, Green Bay was a 7 seed last year in this postseason, and they looked dominant. They almost looked like they had a breath of fresh air. Now, of course, when you have a banged-up quarterback on one side, you're going to have a banged-up quarterback on the other side, apparently, because Jordan Love's gone through some injuries, although he probably could have come back last week. I would not be surprised if this is a close game, only because of the fact that I don't expect any of these NFC games to be blowouts, unless Sam Darnold's on Monday, which we'll talk about in just a second. But I like this game a lot just because of the fact of the history between the two teams and the atmosphere that's going to be in Philadelphia, and the fact that the first 5 incompletion passes from Jalen Hurts and the Philly fans are going to start to pounce. So I'm very interested to see how this game goes. Now, Joe, if you want to stay on for the rest of these games, you can in this segment, and because we are going to try to do some good back and forth over here as we get to from one hated rival to the Eagles to The Commanders, I can't hate them. They have Jaden Daniels. I love my LSU guys. Back in the playoffs for the first time in 4 years, rookie Jaden Daniels has taken DC to new heights. Copyright Kelsey's check is in the mail. Sorry, I mentioned new heights. We love the podcast. As
Well
their
done.
12-5 record is their best record since they went to Super Bowl 26. The Buccaneers are the hosts, and this is old habit for them. They've been in the playoffs 5 straight times. They've had 4 straight division titles. But the last time Tampa Bay opened the playoffs on the road, Washington was the home team. They had a much different QB in Taylor Heinicke, who wasn't really even playing too much. He was just really a backup. And they were still called the goddamn Washington football team. They weren't even called the Commanders yet. This was just 5 years ago. COVID was a weird time. Actually, I think it was 4 years ago. COVID again, still a weird time. Seems like yesterday, Jay, even though it wasn't really yesterday. But give me a player on both sides to watch.
Like my AFC choices, my NFC choices may be the Captain Obvious choices, but that doesn't make them wrong. The players to watch on each team in this 3 versus 6 wildcard matchup are the quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield for the Bucs, and the likely offensive rookie of the year, the aforementioned Jaden Daniels for the Commanders. Let's start with Mayfield, who put up an epic season, easily the best of his career, in first-time offensive coordinator Liam Cohen's offense. 71.4% completion percentage, 4,500 yards passing, 7.9 yards per attempt, 41 touchdowns. His 16 interceptions did lead the NFL, but he did put up a 106.8 passer rating. The 4,500 passing yards and 41 touchdowns are career highs. His completion percentage was 3rd best in the NFL, as were those 4,500 passing yards. The 41 TDs were tied for 2nd best. Mayfield did all of this without star wide receiver Chris Godwin for the back half of the year, who was placed on IR and lost for the season after week 7 after dislocating his ankle. And at the time, Godwin was on pace for a 121 reception, 1,399 yard, 12 touchdown season. But by leaning on the other star receiver, that would be Mike Evans, who put up 74 catches for 1,004 yards, 13.6 per catch, and 11 scores, and with a 9-yard catch on the final play of the regular season, tied Jerry Rice's record of 11 straight seasons with 1,000 receiving yards, along with role players like tight end Cade Otton, who put up 59 catches for 600 yards and 4 scores, and running backs Rashad White, 51 catches, 393 yards, and 6 scores. And Bucky Irving, 47 catches for 392 yards, stepping up in the passing game. And White and Irving leading a rushing attack that finished 4th in the NFL with 149.2 yards per game. Mayfield led one of the most prolific offenses in NFL history since the turn of the century. They are the only offense to meet or exceed all of the following marks in a single season. 28 points per game, Tampa Bay, 28.6. 6 yards per play, Tampa Bay, 6.2. 65% red zone touchdown rate, Bucs, 66.7. That's 2 out of every 3. 50% third down conversion rate, they were a tick under 51%. There have been 798 offenses since the year 2000. 39 of them scored at least 28 points per game on offense. That's excluding points scored on defense or special teams. 30 of those 39 average at least 6 yards per play. 18 of the 30 converted red zone possessions into touchdowns at least 65% of the time. Of those 18, only the 2024 Tampa Bay Bucs converted at least half of their third down tries. Now, strong finishes are becoming a common occurrence for Todd Bowles' Buccaneers. Last season, they needed a 5-1 finish to win the NFC South. This season, Tampa Bay fell into a 4-6 hole, low-lighted by a 4-game losing streak from week 7 through 10, then closed out the year winning 6 of their last 7 to clinch the AFC North, or as Rabbi said, AFC North South rather, the NFC South rather, for the aforementioned 4th straight year. Mayfield, during that 6-1 stretch, 72.6% completion, averaged 285 yards passing per game, 8.8 yards per attempt with 7 TDs, against 7 picks and a 111.5 passer rating. That included a 48-14 week win over Carolina, where he went 27 of 32, 84.4% completion, 359 yards, 11.2 per attempt, with 5 touchdowns, no pick, and a 153.0 passer rating. 158.3 is perfect, folks. Now, I didn't think Baker Mayfield could top the season he had last year under Dave Canales, but he did. And if this late season production carries over to the postseason, who knows how far the Bucs can go. Now, Rabbi, as our resident LSU fan, and you saw plenty of Jaden Daniels during the 2 seasons he was at Baton Rouge, but I don't think even you saw this season coming from the number 2 overall pick in the 2024 NFL Draft. 69% completion percentage, 3,568 yards passing, 7.4 per attempt, 25 passing touchdowns against only 9 picks and a 100.1 passer rating. A team leading 891 rushing yards. That's second in the NFL to only Lamar Jackson in rushing yards by quarterbacks. He averaged 6 yards a carry, scored 6 times on the ground, and led Washington to their first 11-plus win season since 1991. And he showed a knack for making big plays at the right time. We all saw the 52-yard Hail Mary to beat Chicago in Week 8, and that was just one of the 4 game-winning drives he led this season and one of the 3 touchdowns he threw on the final play of the game. Daniels ranked second in the NFL with 12 touchdown passes in the fourth quarter and overtime. And as crazy as that stat is, check this one out. Daniels recorded a 59 total EPA on design runs and scrambles. That's more than any other player this season and gives us some serious insight into how huge Daniels' production with his legs has been for the Commanders. Try this one. 26% of Washington's third and fourth down conversions this season have come off quarterback runs, third best in the NFL, behind the brotherly shove Eagles and the Josh Allen-led Bills. But when you take away 1 yard to go situations, as in 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1, the Commanders have used quarterback runs to convert 22% of their 3rd and 4th downs, which is the highest mark in the NFL. Now, they'll need run game production from more than just Daniels. They've had 3 games this season where they've been held to less than 100 yards rushing and lost all 3. 2 of them came during a 3-game losing streak in November. But in their 5-game winning streak to close the season, they averaged 169.2 yards per game on the ground, including 2 where they topped 200. Now, Washington will go as far as their rookie quarterback takes them. In the first 4 wins of that 5-game winning streak, he sat for most of the season finale win over Dallas. Daniels put up the kind of legit dual threat numbers that should, as I said at the outset, make him the offensive rookie of the year. He completed 72.1% of his passes. He averaged 229.3 yards passing per game, 6.7 yards per attempt, 13 passing TDs against just 4 picks with a 109.8 passer rating through the air. He averaged 77 yards per game rushing on the ground on 11.3 carries. That's 6.8 yards per carry on the ground with a touchdown as the Commanders' offense averaged more than 32 points per game. What made these numbers even more amazing is that his offensive line struggled to protect him as he was sacked 20 times during the 5-game winning streak, including 3 games where he was sacked at least 4 times. Washington was top 10 in total offense, yards per play, points per game, red zone touchdowns, red zone TD percentage, scoring percentage, points per drive, and they have plenty of talent on offense. Running back Brian Robinson was second to Daniels, tick under 800 yards rushing, and tops with 8 scores on the ground. Wide receiver Terry McLaurin had another typical season leading the team with 82 catches for 1,096 yards and 13 scores. Tight end Zach Ertz chipped in with 66 catches, 654 yards, and 7 touchdowns. But there were multiple games this season where Daniels just willed the Commanders to victory, the most recent being the Week 16 and 17 wins over Philly and Atlanta. He may need to do so again in order for Washington to get past Tampa Bay.
There has only been 2 quarterbacks in the history of the NFL as a rookie who have had better passer ratings than Jaden Daniels. 101.2 was his passer rating this year, which is insane. Another thing that I wanted to note, both Daniels and Bo Nix have, who we talked about earlier, have had 10 wins, 30 touchdowns rushing and passing combined, and 4,000 of offense yards of offense through the ground and the air. No quarterback as a rookie had ever hit that mark before this season. Now 2 have done it, and it's those 2. And now a little trivia for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
This is the 4th time in NFL history we have had a playoffs with 2 rookie quarterbacks. Can anyone give me any of the other 3 seasons? And the names are very famous. All of these names are pretty famous.
Where we've had 2 rookie quarterbacks?
Where we've had at least 2 rookie quarterbacks. One of the seasons was 3, and that's actually the last one.
Wow. Any of them since the turn of the century, Rabbi, or were they all?
All of them are since, 2 of them are since the turn of the century.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Should I play the Jeopardy think music over here, or do we have an answer?
No, I think you're
Uh,
gonna have to. I think you're gonna have to. I think you're gonna have to make
83,
us.
83,
Oh,
Elway and
Marino.
Marino.
Elway Marino, sure.
08, Matt Ryan and Joe Flacco.
Ah,
And 2012, Luck, Griffin, and Mr. Unlimited Russell Wilson. All
wow.
doing that, by the
oh,
way.
Wow. All right.
by the way,
Finally, before
by
go
the way,
ahead.
they all played Wild Card Weekend in 2012. Not to have remember it.
Yes, they did, and that was still when they had 2 buys. By the way, one more
Eh,
thing, and this is a shout
nice
out
to see it.
to,
Yeah.
and this is a shout out to Anthony. Remember, Dan Quinn is a guy who coached at Hofstra from 1996 to 2000, defensive line coach, defensive coordinator, and line coach. But I also want to mention that my new favorite offensive coordinator crush, and I mentioned this to Joe over the weekend, Liam Cohen, the guy who replaced Canellis over in Tampa Bay, who has had an amazing season with this offense, including having their first 1,000-yard rusher in Bucky Irving since Doug Martin back in 2015. Liam Cohen, Anthony, was the quarterback of UMass from 2004 to 2008. So I was like, he was setting some records against Hofstra when they still had a football team way back when. So that's a name you want to watch out for, because I think, just like Dave Canales, I don't think Liam Cohen is long for being an offensive coordinator. Kind of the opposite of a lot of the people out there. He's no Doug Peterson, who's probably going back to coordinator hell for probably the rest of his for a lot of the
If
rest
he's
of his.
lucky.
I think coordinator is still a good position for him. I still think he has some time. Okay. Finally, just like the Commanders' best season in 33 years got them a road game. Congratulations. The Vikings' best season in 26 years got them the 5 seed. Congratulations. And a date with the Los Angeles Rams. After a loss against Detroit on October 20th, the next game, Minnesota would lose on the road to the Los Angeles Rams. Hopefully it's not deja vu, whether it be in LA or
All over again.
Or if it unfortunately has to move, it would have to move, as we found out tonight. The game would be played in Glendale due to the wildfires that are going on currently in California. But the NFL has showed that there is a contingency plan, so this game will be on Monday night. Hopefully, not deja vu all over again to ruin the best season of Sam Darnold's career. Anthony, finish this segment up for me and give me the players to watch for the perennial playoff teams from La La Land and Skull Town.
Yeah, for the Rams, it's gonna be Kyron Williams, the running back. The first 2 years, he's a young man that's been hit with a lot. It just has a battle with injuries. For rookie season, high ankle sprain, broken foot. Last year, he had a high ankle sprain and broke his hand in the wild card loss to the Detroit Lions. This year, with a change of preparation in the offseason, he's had his career year. He's been healthy most of the season. He's played in 16 of the 17 games for the Rams. They're not playing week 17, by the way, against Seattle. He finished the season with career high carries, 316. Yards on the ground with 1,299 and total touchdowns with 16. Not to mention 34 receptions on 40 targets. He's playing 86% of the Rams snaps. By the way, you forgot to mention this, Rabbi. This is a rematch from Week 8 earlier this season.
I mentioned it because it literally came after a loss to Detroit. That's why I was mentioning it. So yeah, this could be a big time deja vu moment for Sam Darnold. This was a game that he had his Darnold had his face mask kind of torn apart at the end, kind of ripped in the end zone, and it wasn't seen.
Yeah, it's the Thursday night game. Yeah, it's a Thursday night football game. I remember. And the Rams is the Vikings are losing their minds on that long call. But in that game, Williams ran for 97 yards and 23 carries, and he might be catching the Vikings blitz happy defense led by Brian Flores at a good time, because in the first 11 games, the Vikings only allowed 86 yards or more on the ground 3 times. But since week 12, since week 13, It's been 6 games where they've allowed a team to run for more than 100 yards. The Cardinals, the Falcons, and the Lions have all ran for 150 yards. And last week, the Vikings had a hard time stopping Jamal Gibbs on the ground, who ran for 139 and scored 3 touchdowns. By the way, if you add the passes, the reception, the receiver touchdown that he got in that game, he pretty much matched Al Bundy's 4 touchdowns in a single game on Sunday Night Football. For Williams, he's been the Rams' best weapon. This week, he may be the best and the most consistent weapon as far as going against the Vikings defense that is trending downward since the second half of the season. For the Vikings, it's Justin Jefferson. And look, I have completely raved about Jefferson the last when we had this show and since his rookie campaign. He is a phenomenal receiver. In that game against the Rams, he actually had a whole 8 catches with 115 yards on 9 targets. He finished the season with over 100 catches, 15-33, and 10 receiver touchdowns, and going to the 4th Pro Bowl. Last Sunday night, though, the Detroit Lions roughed them up. I think they really took approach that we don't really see with many young receivers these days, particularly game breakers like a Justin Jefferson, being physical at the line of scrimmage, pretty much roughing them up a little bit. And it got to a point where Meek Robinson did as good a job in covering Jefferson as I've seen in quite a long time. Of course, they go back to the high school years, so the familiarity definitely showed last Sunday night. But it got to a point where Justin Jefferson was really complaining about the officiating and the non-calls he was getting, the calls he wasn't getting after the game, and it's something that should be that you just take notice of, because when you see young receivers and they get put in a situation where it's more physical, where there's a little more tugging and pulling that's being allowed down the field, you want to see how exactly do they react or how they respond to this kind of to that kind of coverage that they're going to see. And if you're the Rams, I'm quite sure they took note of that and they're going to try to permit the same kind of strategy as far as trying to rough him up a little bit, trying to get Jefferson a little bit out of this game. And by the way, do anybody have a calculator to how many missed opportunities the Vikings had in the red zone? They have been for as good as they've been, as good as Sam Darnold has been this season, they have been dreadful in the red zone. And Sunday night, it was just ridiculous. And Jefferson, on a number of those passes, was open. Donald just couldn't get the ball to him because either there was an defender in his face, or he just ran out of time, or he airmailed a throw where Jefferson, even for his athleticism, couldn't quite catch up to. It's going to be interesting if the Rams were very good at getting after who can't get after the quarterback and can't pressure Sam Darnold like they did back in Week 8. It's going to be very interesting to see if they can get the ball to Jefferson, who is always a big play waiting to happen. If he struggles, gets taken out of the game, he only had 3 catches against the Lions. What else can he do to contribute to the Vikings probably getting out of this round? He's going to have to maybe involve himself in more blocking in the ground game, maybe being more of a decoy and allow some of the other receivers to kind of get single coverage and to open things up for Donald. But Jefferson's reaction to the physicality that the Lions implemented on him was something that caught my attention, because it's like when you're a young receiver, you don't want to publicly show that frustration, only because you know your next opponent is taking notes. They know, okay, he's a young man, good as he is, we can fluster him a little bit. Let's see if we can do that just a little bit more. Of course, officiating is always going to be a question or two, because every officiating crew calls the game, and Joe, you know, they call the game very differently. They may have a officiating crew that call game a little tighter than with the line what we saw in Detroit Sunday night. So that's something really interesting to see when it comes to Justin Jefferson, especially early on. If he's not involved and they can't get the ball to him, what exactly is he going to do as far as his temperament, how he carries himself on the sideline? More importantly, his interaction with Sam Darnold. Like I said, these young receivers, good as they can be, they are Hey, I'm a receiver too. We're divas. We always think we're open. We
You're
always
a
think
diva whether
we
you
always
were a
want the
receiver or
football.
not, by the way. You're
We
still our
want the
diva
we want the
regardless.
ball, even there's 5 guys. We want the ball if there's 5 guys on us. But at the same time, we also get frustrated when things aren't going our way. And it's going to be interesting with the Rams if they because Jefferson had a big game against them. I'm quite sure whatever didn't work in week 8, they're not going to go again this time around. I think Jefferson gave the Rams somewhat of a tip off as to how we're going to play him again. This time back at home in a playoff game, well, you might have a little more physicality going on. So yeah, Sunday night should be really good. Well,
Joe,
Monday night should be
Monday
really
night.
good.
So,
And
Joe, we were kind of talking about it before and just like how Detroit kind of messed up the schemes for Justin Jefferson and the Vikings on Sunday. How much do you think that kind of will? Do you think it's more Detroit of what they did on Sunday night, or do you think Minnesota will have a little bit of lasting effect going into this game against LA?
well, the obviously the famous line of Sam Darnold of seeing ghosts is going to come back into everybody's thought process at this point because
Mhm.
if they can get pressure on him and he reacts that way, that's what it was. But and you and I watched some of this the other day. That entire defensive scheme is as good as anything
Amazing.
I've ever seen. Was was as good as the one Spagnuolo had against New England in the Super Bowl. Rivals even Belichick's one from back in the Super Bowl in the day. Their scheme, if you go back and watch that and you watch it on the all 22, or you just watch the receivers and the coverage guys, they perfectly switched off on every crossing a pattern, they switched off perfectly. If Jefferson went in motion, they went in the backfield and hit him. They didn't let him make the turn and see if he could beat them to a corner. Again, Robinson knows him really well, but if you notice, he doesn't bite on any of those moves. He just stands still. And that was the key to kind of playing those guys the way they did. And Darnold missed a couple of throws, but some of those that they go, oh, he just missed him, he's wide open. There was no way he was getting it there because there was no way Jefferson was making it back to the post at that point because of that. And we talk about officiating, and Jay, you and I have talked about this in past years. Playoff officiating, a lot more they let go.
Yeah.
They let them play a lot more. So
Yeah.
if you decide you're going to play head up, and I don't know the Rams are good enough in the back end to do this, but if they're going to play head up and they're going to play one-on-one and they're going to play close to the line of scrimmage, and you can get your hands on legally within that five yards, and then let them go, that's going to wreak a little bit of havoc. But I also think, and this was pointed out on the telecast Sunday, there was no adjustment by Minnesota to shorten the routes up.
No,
And
not at
they
all.
said,
No.
and again, Collinsworth showed it a few times ago. Hey, there's 3 guys. They're all got their backs to the quarterback, still running their routes. And he's getting rushed by 6 guys, and nobody cut their route off. Nobody turned back. Nobody adjusted. There was nobody to throw the ball to because he had to keep everybody in the block. So there was no outlet pass. So you got to figure that O'Connell's smart enough as a head coach, as an offensive head coach, to say, hey, that one's on me because we didn't adjust. We didn't have the right game plan. We thought we could just go out there and beat them because they were all beat up. We figured they'd play a lot more zone, so we'd have open spaces, which they didn't do at all. But again, and of course they switched up now and then zone and man to man, which of course you have to do. You can't play the same thing all the time. And I don't think Darnold was good at picking it up. And he gets out of the huddle too late a couple of times, and that hurts them a little bit. Hopefully, they actually delay a game this week when they have it. But I think that that's some of the stuff that's going to hurt him in this part. But I don't think the Rams can easily duplicate what Detroit did.
No.
If you guys get a chance to go back and watch that game, even
Man, it
watch
was
the
great.
regular part of it, just stare at the receivers on the top of the screen and watch the defensive backs and watch how they switch off, watch how everybody does it. It was a brilliantly played defensive game.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to Aaron Glenn. I mean, considering what he was able to pull off, basically, without the guys he wanted to have in this game. And I agree with you, Joe. I think it's on O'Connell as much, maybe even slightly more than it is on Darnold, because for most of the year, against pressure, Darnold has been fantastic. He has picked defenses apart when they have tried to go all out and throw the kitchen sink at him. So I give props to Aaron Glenn for the scheme. I agree with you. I don't think of course, the Rams are going to look at what Glenn put out there, but you actually have to have the right personnel to be able to run that scheme the same way, to be able to impact Darnold that way. And I agree with you. I think Kevin O'Connell looks at that and goes, okay, chances are I know Sean McVay, he's going to tell his defensive coordinator, try and, put something similar together.
Sure.
How do we put Sam in a better position to react and be successful if he sees similar looks from the Rams as they try to duplicate what Aaron Glenn and the Lions did?
Yeah. And we always talk about, again, because we're all trained this way now, except for one or two people in these boxes, that it's the offense that's screwing up, right? It's like, oh, Sam Darnold had a bad game. Well, not really. It was nowhere to go with the ball. It's not his fault. There is coaching, and again, there's brilliant defense that was played against him. And hey, I'm glad Detroit got their week off. They get to get some guys back healthy. Montgomery may come back by next week or the week after.
Said to be coming back, by the way, from Dan.
I think it'll be brilliant. And I think, again, if you go back, if you get a chance to, I know something that you guys don't normally do. If you get a chance to go back and watch that game and not watch the line, don't watch the guys in the middle. Don't watch the line of scrimmage. Try to just concentrate on the other guys, and you'll be amazed at how well they played some of those switches and some of those routes.
Yeah,
that's why it's all about. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Aaron Glenn just excellently disguised both his pre and post snap looks. That was one of the best defensive game plans that I have seen thrown at Minnesota all season.
Yeah. Oh, easily. Yeah.
And we're going to see how Detroit does that in the playoffs when they have a little bit more. Joe, thank you again for joining us tonight. And I, myself, will see you as the playoffs go on in these next few weeks. And I will see you on Monday for the Wild Card edition of the Official Review podcast. Thank you, Joseph.
Always a pleasure, my friend. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you, sir. And as we move on, we continue. It's time for the youngins to take the spotlight as Thursday and Friday sees college football playoff semifinals, the college football playoff semifinals take shape. And the theme is the same from the last time we did this show for CFP's Final Four, because all of those teams that hosted their first round games are here now because they beat the rusty bye teams in the CFP quarters. Let's start with Friday's Cotton Bowl clash between Ohio State and Texas. The Texas Longhorns did not do anything easy in the 2024 season, so why would their Chick-fil-A Bowl game be any different after a double OT win 39-31 over Arizona State? Now, despite being close to a touchdown underdog in this game, Steve Sarkisian and the Longhorns get to play deep in the heart of Texas in Arlington. Anthony, here's a statement. The Longhorns will make it to the CFP championship if
they play a complete game on offense. I mean, the Longhorns, for what it's worth, they go back to that game a couple weeks ago. They raced up to a 14-3 lead. And looked like they were going to just make this game. They were going to win a game in a lap, but in a college football playoff that's been full of one-sided games, and yet the offense completely petered out in the second half. Arizona State erased a 16-point deficit, and the game went to overtime, and basically Texas somehow survived on a 4th and long and won the game in a double overtime. But the thing is, too, what stood out is the fact that Quinn Ewers has completely stepped up. He's been phenomenal in these 2 college football playoff games. The Longhorns, for a running game, has been flat out inconsistent. They ran all over Clemson a few weeks back, and then only ran for 53 yards against Arizona State. In the and obviously on New Year's Day, they have to just get the running game going at the very least to save their defense. Arizona State ran 97 plays on offense. The Longhorns 60. At the very least, you want to be able to give your defense some kind of a rest. And also, the Longhorns offense was just on the field for 22 minutes compared to Arizona State Sun Devils 37 minutes. The some of the keys to the victory is the fact that they got to avoid the dreaded third quarter drag. And the Longhorns offense they've been so good in the first half, really done nothing in the third quarter. That kind of opened the door for the Sun Devils come back in the first place. They couldn't string together first downs. They stalled our offense. They only picked up 2 first downs on the ground the entire second half against Arizona State. They got to get on to a fast start too. You mentioned this is a cotton ball. This is a pseudo home game, literally for the Longhorns, in a situation where they have a majority home crowd to their advantage. By the way, their mascot actually gets to show up to this game. He was allowed in Mercedes-Benz Stadium for obvious reasons. But they had to get onto a fast start only because, think about this, Ohio State jumped out to a 34-8 lead on an Oregon Ducks team that had one of the best offenses in football. So clearly they have got to put points on the board and got to get out and definitely have to find a balance on offense. I mean, and look, Quinn Ewers has been great. He's been essential, threw for close to 300 yards and against Arizona State, but he needs a running game. Ohio State has the number 1 defense in the land for a reason. They can get after the quarterback. They can shut teams down. A running game is going to have to. They're gonna have to be able to run the football to at least get some balance. And then you don't want Ewers getting back, having to drop back more than 25, 30 times, and that Ohio State defense beat him up. So it's going to be about just trying to get more of a balance on the offensive side of football. Try to win a little more of the possession game as far as time, but also you want to keep your defense fresh. I mean, you the fact that they won a game where the defense is on the field for 97 plays, it's still one of the more mind-boggling stats to, without question, one of the best college football game in this playoffs by far. I mean, that was a tremendous game. Shout out to the Sun Devils for coming back. I mean, that was just a great comeback. But yeah, this is the Longhorns' key to victory: offensive balance.
To be fair, Bevo was banned because of the fact that he is a 1,700-pound steer, and it wasn't because of the issues that he had with UGA way back when in the Sugar Bowl many years ago. And ironically enough, by the way, if Texas makes the national championship, it's back in Atlanta. So this is Bevo's last game on the sidelines, win or lose this season. So we'll see what happens.
And state of Georgia is just hating on steers, huh?
It has nothing to do with the steers. It just has to do with the fact that he's 1,700 pounds. For you to have them in the
I don't know how. To be fair, I don't know how you transport him from Texas to Atlanta.
Ironically enough,
long haul trailer, actually.
Carefully is how you do it. Ironically enough, by the way, Texas will, if they make the national championship, will play 3 out of their last 5 games at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is kind of ironic. Okay. The Buckeyes, Jay, dominated, avenging their heinous loss. Not the Michigan one. Got to wait till November 2025 for that again, Ryan Day. But they did beat Oregon, avenging the other loss in the Rose Bowl, 41-21, and it wasn't even that close. Now the Buckeyes have the swagger, the annoyance, and are the favorites to win it all. Jay, the Buckeyes, with a B, are going to win and make it to the CFP final.
Hey, Rabbi, this is somewhat of a family show. I'm not going to pronounce it the way I normally do for the sake of all. The Buckeyes will win if the game plan / offensive, if the offense continues to play to their strength, which is get the playmakers the ball. The game plan / offensive identity that I told Ryan Day to execute / get back to against Tennessee. You know, the whole don't go trying to prove how tough you are like you did against the Wolverines. Nobody, especially your fan base, cares if you prove that you're tough. They just care if you win. That game plan offensive identity. Well, he carried that over to Oregon, which resulted in a second consecutive 40-plus point outburst by the Buckeyes en route to their second consecutive CFP win. Now, the Buckeyes will need to make it 3 games in a row of we're going to get the ball to our stud receivers and you can't stop it type of offense if they want to get past Texas and make it to the national championship. Now, across their first 2 CFP games against a pair of defenses that are ranked in the top 25 in both yards and points allowed, Ohio State has outscored its opponents 83-38 and outgained them 973 to 532. Largely
Insane.
by,
That's insane.
I'm telling you, largely by getting back to getting the ball to their playmakers in space on the perimeter as the focal point of their offensive scheme. Now, Day attributes a large part of the Buckeyes' offensive success to offensive coordinator Chip Kelly, who, in Day's words, quote, "I thought Chip called a great game. I thought the whole offensive staff worked hard to put the game plan together." Now, that game plan starts with freshman wide receiver Jeremiah Smith, who has been practically unstoppable. 13 catches, 290 yards, at 22.3 yards a catch, and 4 touchdowns through these 2 games. But quarterback Will Howard, who has averaged 315 yards passing and 11.5 yards per attempt over these 2 games on 41 of 55, 74.5% completion percentage, with 5 touchdowns against just 1 pick and a 197.1 passer rating, has used all of the weapons at his disposal, not just Smith. Senior wide receiver Emeka Egbuka, 10 catches, 153 yards, 15.3 per catch, and 1 touchdown. Sophomore wide receiver Carnell Tate has been quiet, but Howard has gotten the ball into the hands of wide receivers Trevion Henderson, Quishon Judkins, 9 catches, 83 yards combined across the 2 games, as well as tight end G. Scott, who has 5 catches for 69 yards across both games. But it's been more than just Howard playing pitch and catch with his receivers. The Buckeyes have piled up 337 rushing yards, 181 against Oregon after 156 against Tennessee, and they've averaged 4.8 yards per carry, led by Judkins, 85 yards on 17 carries, 5 a pop against Oregon, and Henderson, who had 80 yards on 10 carries, 8 per pop against Tennessee. The change in the offensive scheme has resulted in the Buckeyes putting up explosive plays at a ridiculous rate over these 2 games. 4 touchdowns of 20-plus yards, 2 in the ground and 2 on the air in the win over the Vols. 4 touchdowns of 40-plus yards, 3 in the air and 1 on the ground in the win over the Ducks. Ohio State will have their work cut out for them against a Texas defense that was number 1 in the nation in pass defense, led by senior defensive back Jihadi Brown, who was the Jim Thorpe Award winner for Best Defensive Back. But as Judkins said, quote, "We are all playmakers, so just give us the ball. We'll make plays." If they're able to do that, I don't see how Ohio State's offense can be stopped.
I don't think Ohio State's offense can be stopped, but Jahade Barron, not Jahade Brown in Texas, who's my X factor on that side, will try to do the trip. He's a 5th-year Texas native who put together a season in 2024 that had 42 solo tackles, 5 interceptions, and 11 passes. That's in 15 games. Jim Thorpe Award winner? Yep. Peach Bowl defensive MVP with 11 total tackles and 7 solo? Yeah. And that defense, again, leads the FBS in several categories, as you just mentioned. Passing yards allowed, not even 150 a game. It's 143.1 and 28 turnovers gained. A scoring defense of 12.5 points per game. Pass efficiency defense, 95.19. Third in passes intercepted, 19. Total defense under 250. 5th nationally at first down defense. 6th in third down conversion percentage, just about 30.6%. Red zone defense, 71.4%. In the Longhorns also gave up 4 passing touchdowns in 13 games. That is the fewest in the FBS, and they've never had that much in a single season outside of one other year, and that's 1972. And oh yeah, in the 3 of the last 4 games to cap off the regular season, shut out in the first half. Nothing. This is a guy who is Barron, who's a 5th-year defensive back, 54 games and 36 starts. And the best part about it is we're going to see him versus Jeremiah Smith. And I think Jeremiah Smith is the reason why Ohio State is where he is. He is the guy who brings the top off of any defense whatsoever. And he is a freshman, ladies and gentlemen. You get 2 more years of him, by the way. And it's going to be, as Barron said about the game, going to be a physical game. He's a physical player. I have to be physical. I'm a physical player myself, 5'11", 200. That's the great thing about football. I've been having an amazing time and an opportunity to go against amazing players. So it's going to be a fun opportunity. Fun for us, that's for sure. And then let's go to Ohio State, where you find Jack Sawyer, a guy who has played 1,668 snaps since the last time an offensive lineman was called for holding against him. That was back in the year 2021, year of our Lord. Him and his partner, JT Tuimoloau, each finished with 2 sacks in that Rose Bowl against Oregon. That brings their totals to 10 and 8, respectively. And there's only been one time in school history when 2 OSU players had reached double digits in sack in the same season. Mike Finks with 11, and a little guy by the name of Mike Vrabel, who's been helping that team as a coach this whole year. They were a dynamic 1-2 punch over 13 games in 1994. Note, the NCAA did not keep the track of stats until 2000, but Ohio State, because, they have to keep their own records. They sure as hell did. They could match those numbers, and by the way, Tuimoloau is a couple of sacks away from trying to get to 60.5, which is Chase Young's record. Back also, Sawyer had 1.5 sacks also in the opening round win against Tennessee. And he has just been a beast this entire year. And one thing that'll be interesting to note is Sawyer is going to be trying to sack Quinn Ewers. And remember, Quinn Ewers was in Columbus for one season before he transferred. That was his roommate. Sawyer says he's looking forward to the opportunity to line up against Ewers in this bowl game. And we're looking forward to that opportunity as well. Now, before we go into the next game, I wanted to give you a nice little common bond. The last time Texas and Ohio State played each other was in 2005 and 2006. They played a home and home. Ironically enough, the last time Penn State and Notre Dame played each other, because they used to play, by the way, all the time in like the early 90s into like the 2000s, but the last time they played each other was 2006 and 2007. So that's something interesting. And another fact to note is the last time until this year that Notre Dame played a game at home that was not broadcast on the network of NBC because ABC and ESPN did their college football playoff game. Right. It was against Penn State in 1990. And the guy who caught the game-winning pass in that game, defensive coordinator Al Golden, who is currently on the sidelines, of course, for Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So we move on. One day earlier to see those 7th and 6th seeds, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish and Penn State Nittany Lions in the Orange Bowl. Winner gets their first final of the CFP era. And for Penn State, their first final in God knows how long. They've never actually, I think, made a final in either the CFP or the BCS era. Oh. By the way, as a bonus, their coach, whoever it is, whether it be Marcus Freeman or James Franklin, will be the first ever African-American coach who will be playing for a national title. So a lot on the line here. Anthony, Penn State looked a little bit up and down versus Boise State, but here they are again, away from their first ever official national title game. So Penn State will beat Notre Dame if?
They take away Notre Dame's running game and make them one-dimensional. I mean, the Penn State Nittany Lions defense, it's kind of Captain Obvious. We look at the Fighting Irish running game. Jeremiah Love, we talk about Jelvin Price, but also quarterback Riley Leonard. As 3 prolific runners that they're going to have to slow down. And I think they realize the Fighting Irish don't really get a lot of explosive plays out of the passing attack. So one of the things they're going to have to do is be able to shut down the running game and force the Fighting Irish offense into more third and long situations. Basically, make Leonard beat you with his arm and not necessarily his legs. Go back to when they played against Boise State. They was able to slow down Ashton Gentry to his lowest yard total of the season, just 104 yards on 30 carries, and they made him work for every one of those yards. I mean, they literally had him shut down for most of that game. But the fact that they were able to do it without Abdul Carter, who left the game, the best defensive player, tells you just how good that Penn State interior line has been this season. I mean, you talk about Zane Durant, Davon J. Thomas, Kozar Lindsay, and Min Vandover as well. That combination able to take away Boise State, take Genty really out of the game. And the defense has been great with forcing takeaways too. Think about going back to the first round against SMU and taking 2 pick sixes back for touchdowns. They've been a really good team of taking the ball away and being able to slow down the running game. So I expect Penn State to really keep that same formula. They're gonna put the onus on the Fighting Irish to really try to open up their offense and they have to beat them through the air. And these are 2 really good defenses. So I expect a close game, but that is the recipe for success for Penn State.
Penn State and Notre Dame, by the way, 2 punching bags in the BCS era and really coming into this year. And now they're 1 win away from a national title berth. So we'll see what happens. Now, Jay, Notre Dame has had 2 CFP wins under their belt. That's 2 more than when these playoffs actually started. But now the team that, my God, lost to Northern Illinois over 4 months ago. Northern Illinois, by the way, 7-5. They're not really the max greatest team in the world, but Notre Dame is looking for a 13th straight win since then. So cheer for old Notre Dame, Jay. How will they win against the Penn State? What will they need? How will they win? The Notre Dame Fighting Irish will beat the Penn State the Lions if
the offense scores more than 1 touchdown.
That's a probably good statement.
And you know the effect of Jeremiah Love's health, how it pertains to that. Look, we all know this game's going to be a rock fight. Both these teams have top flight defenses. Anthony just gave you the Nittany Lions resume. Points will likely be at a premium, but if the Irish want to advance, their offense will have to score more than the 1 touchdown and average more than the 4.0 yards per play they managed in their 23-10 win over Georgia in the quarters. And there is some question about the health of star running back Jeremiah Love, who hurt his knee after rushing for 99 yards on 13 carries, 7.6 per tote in the regular season finale. He seemed to be fine after rushing for 108 yards on just 8 carries, 13.5 yards per carry in the opening round over Indiana, including a 98-yard touchdown run in the first quarter, only to apparently aggravate the injury after rushing for just 19 yards on 6 carries, 3.2 per carry against Georgia. If Love is not 100%, then that's going to put added pressure on quarterback Riley Leonard. As I said during our preview of the Irish's opening round CFP game against fellow Hoosier State program Indiana, that there may come a point where Notre Dame may have to do something it hasn't had to do all season, and that's rely on Riley Leonard's arm to win them a game. And accomplishing that would require him to channel his inner Blue Devil and put up a true dual threat performance. Now, the Irish didn't need him to do that to knock off the Hoosiers, as Leonard put up his lowest passing yardage game of the season, managing just 90 yards on 15 of 24. That's a 62.5% completion percentage, but that is a minuscule 3.8 yards per attempt. He did throw a touchdown, did not throw a pick, and he had a 107.8 passer rating, his 3rd lowest of the season. He was somewhat his usual self on the ground, rushing for a team-leading 80 yards on 14 carries. It's a 5.7 average. Somehow that stat line resulted in Leonard winning Sugar Bowl MVP. This was the 5th time that Leonard had at least 70 yards rushing in a game this season, but it was the first where he passed for less than 100 in the same game. Now, Notre Dame may be 11th in the nation at 217.5 yards per game rushing, and 3rd in the nation at 6.1 yards per carry, but they can't be, as Anthony noted, that one-dimensional on offense. Now, even if Love plays, and as of Tuesday, reports are that he's on track to do so, even if his practice workload was lighter than usual. And even if he's able to produce at the same level as he did against Indiana, that may not be enough against Penn State's 8th ranked run defense, which is allowing just a tick under 101 yards per game. As Irish offensive coordinator Mike Denbrook said after the Sugar Bowl, quote, "It's Notre Dame football at its finest. They delivered their very best when their very best was needed. We probably said offensive football back 15 years, but we did what we needed to do to win. Doing what they need to do to win against Penn State will require more from Riley Leonard. Maybe not what he did in the 49-7 Week 6 win against Stanford, where he was 16 of 22, 72.7% completion for 229 yards, 10.4 per attempt, 3 touchdowns, 0 picks, and a 205.2 passer rating through the air, but just 31 yards on 6 carries, 5.2 a pop, and a touchdown on the ground. But it may require a game similar to the one he had in the 51-14 Week 8 win over Navy. where he was 13 for 21, 61.9% completion for 178 yards passing, 8.5 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, no picks, and a 164.5 passer rating through the air, and 83 yards on 10 carries, 8.3 per carry, with a touchdown on the ground. A true dual threat performance. Anything less in the Irish's season may end in the Orange Bowl.
So you're telling me that Notre Dame's not going to get the field goal sack of Gunnar Stockton combo leading to a next touchdown kick return? That's not the way to plan it for basically 37 seconds of game time, expanding 2 halves. That's probably not happening, right?
Usually doesn't carry over.
No.
I know it was solid, but the Irish have had some issues with kickers this year, so I wouldn't exactly put my eggs in the kicking and special teams basket.
The kicking defense special team triple play is probably not happening. No, I'm going to start with Notre Dame for the X Factor, and I'm going to start with Xavier Watts of Notre Dame. He's a COVID fifth-year guy, and he was originally a wide receiver, but he had to switch due to linebacker injuries in 2021 to defense, played 11 games. 2022 became a secondary standout as a safety, and then 2023, 7 interceptions and a Bronco Nagurski Trophy win, one of the best safeties in college football. When you mention who were the 2 people in 2024 that were consensus All-Americans from 2023 and 24, the answer is simple. It's Watts, and it's the Heisman Trophy winner, Travis Hunter. List done. In this game, in the Sugar Bowl, 7 tackles, 6 solo, tackle for loss, missed time in the second half due to apparent shoulder injury, and still had the most solo tackles in the game of anybody. He is the second leading tackler in the Irish with 67 this season. Jack Kaiser, their star linebacker, leads the team at 75. Again, unanimous 2023 All-American, 2024 an All-American, one of only 17 Irish players ever to do so, and the first to do it since 1993. And third in the nation in total interceptions, 5, fourth in the nation in interceptions per game in 0.4, and 12th in the country in passes defended with 1.2 per game. 28 turnovers this season, tied for number 1. We just mentioned the other team a few minutes ago in Texas. Watts responsible for 6 of them by himself. Irish defense is one of the most complete defenses in the country, and that's how they're going to have to do this. I'll mention this again when we talk about Penn State in a second in another set. But Notre Dame was first in passing efficiency defense, first in turnovers gained, 6 defensive touchdowns, third in scoring defense, 4th in passing yards allowed, 4th in interceptions, 7th in fumbles recovered, 9th in red zone defense, 10th in total defense, 10th in first down defenses. Notre Dame is not winning this game with their offense. They're going to do it on both sides of the ball, and it could possibly be an ugly game. But who's going to stop making it an ugly game? How about one of the best tight ends I've ever seen play in college, and that's Tyler Ward of Penn State. It's shocking that he's still not the number 1 tight end possibly coming out into the 2025 draft. Jay, you know that number 1 tight end, Colston Loveland, who's had really the hype going in, is still number 1 on that. But Tyler, well deserved. But Tyler Warren has moved way up on the boards, and I think Tyler gave you nightmares in that USC game when he went for 16 catches.
Did he ever?
Sure did. I feel like he was the only one catching that ball. When Tyler Warren goes into a stadium, his range is whatever state he's in. So in the Orange Bowl, it's going to be Florida as his basic range. Warren has secured 98 catches for 1,158 yards and 9 touchdowns this season. Not shockingly, the most receptions ever by any Penn State player and by any Big Ten tight end. Same with the yardage. His versatility, also, by the way, 197 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground. 6 catches in 9 of the 15 games, 4 100-yard games, 8 touchdowns. He basically, every time he catches the ball, it's a first down. He averages 12 yards per catch. And in this CFP run, in 15 games, it has been number 1 option this season. In the Penn State quarterfinal win against Boise State, Warren, 63 yards, 6 catches, and 2 touchdowns, where he probably was jumping more about 100 pounds less of his actual weight was. But 128 times in 15 games this season, Drew Aller has targeted him. Boise State tried everything to keep him away. Double teams, rolling coverages, ends and linebackers, and guess what? Didn't matter on critical plays.
You can't stop him. You hope to contain him.
That is 100% true. Now, Notre Dame has heavy man coverage, so Drew Aller might need to throw it to Harrison Wallace III a few times. Maybe needs to throw it to Amari Evans, but still Tyler Warren's show. However, Notre Dame has been terrific against tight ends all season long. No touchdowns given up to tight ends all year. 46.1 passer rating Notre Dame had against them when a tight end was targeted, and that's the second best this year, the FBS. In all of those games, 30 catches, 293 yards, and for all tight ends. Now, to be fair, competition Notre Dame played this season is probably not going to be what Tyler Warren is, but just keep those numbers in mind. This is going to be a defense, but Penn State has the best player on the field, and that's including the quarterbacks. So the best player on offense is Tyler Warren. And if Penn State's going to make the national championship game, and God forbid if we get a Penn State-Ohio State national championship game,
it's possible.
It's going to be bowling shoe ugly, as Jim Ross would used to say. He's going to be the reason why. Okay. Tonight, we're going to finish off, and I'd like you to take your drinks and pour one out for SEC football in 2024. Oh. It's time to bury them, and I am the one that's going to bury them, being the biggest SEC fan out there, but I'm going to do my job the correct way. And we understand the SEC still has representation of the college football playoff, but when that representation is in the form of SEC interloper Texas, and if you were to pick the 4 teams that were going to win it all, Texas would probably be number 1 in your hearts, but number 4 on your list. That would be a failure for the SEC. Now, for me, it just means more to say this, that the failure is not the only SEC choke job that the Confederates Favors Conference has had this postseason. The world's had a front row seat for the mediocreness of Tennessee, losing by 25 at Ohio State. And that revived the Buckeyes. It was like almost like you taking the defibrillator to the chest, and then immediately it's woke up and Ohio State said, it's alive, it's alive. And then Georgia's preseason favorite season ended with their 3rd loss of the season in the Sugar Bowl just a week ago against Notre Dame. But may I remind you that that aura of invincibility was not lifted just on the playoff stage. It happened everywhere. Texas A&M lost to a mediocre USC team. Sorry, Jay. Playoff dark horse that should have been in the CFP South Carolina not only fell to Illinois, but other things happened. We'll get to that in a second. And most importantly, Alabama, the team that definitely should have been the playoff, especially against after TCU shit the bed, was figuratively and literally stuck in the mud against the worst Michigan team that we've seen in a while. Again, sorry, Jay, and lost to a Michigan team that did not represent the national champions of 2024 of a year ago. And guess what? Michigan decided to bookend their year on the 1st by beating Alabama and on December 31st by beating Alabama. I love it when a plan comes together. Anyway, when it comes down to it, we could get a Big Ten national title game, and we have no chance of seeing that in the SEC. We might have for the 2nd straight year and only 3rd time since Florida won back-to-back national championships in 2006 and 2007. We might have an SEC titleless national game, but I can tell you why. The league, where it just needs more, is currently only 8-6 this bowl season. Number 1, when you essentially fight each other at points during the regular season, it comes back to haunt you. While teams like Ohio State look like they could play 3 or 4 more games easily, I feel like it could have been 10. The SEC season aged every single team like they were a president of the United States going from year 1 to year 4. They look tired. Then you have the QBs. There were 8 Heisman preseason favorites. 6 of them were SEC QBs, and they all performed at the same level during that season. And that level is mid. Not only did none of these 6 favorites, including seemingly lockety locks of all locks and Alabama QB Jalen Milroe, Texas QB Quinn Ewers, and Georgia QB Carson Beck, all of those, none of them made the top 10 of the final Heisman vote. And if you look at the top 10 of the final Heisman vote, you will see a grand total of 0 SEC players. That's a one proud position that you don't know. It doesn't seem real. And then there's the coach, which is number 3. For all of the hating people of Nick Saban, and we're all card-carrying members of that group over here. Yes, I have a card. The change to Kellen DeVore was noticeable. It's the first 4-loss season for the Tide since Saban year 1, and more losses as a double-digit favorite than Nick Saban ever had in his entire career at Alabama. And with the new crop of coaches, like a seemingly over-his-head Josh Heupel for Tennessee, and Shane Beamer, son of his father, Frank Beamer from Virginia Tech, fighting with Brett Bielema, coach of Illinois, in a loss for South Carolina, it seems like the new crop of coaches either have work to do or are Nick Saban disciples that can't jump out of that Bear Bryant-like shadow. And finally, here's the topper. Sometimes the enemy just gets their just desserts. For all the Bama loyalists who wanted Bama in the playoff because, Bama, and the AD basically asking to reevaluate their non-conference slate because of the losses teams that they played, as if the losses to Oklahoma don't mean anything to the playoff miss at hand. Sorry, Alabama. To coaches like Lane Kiffin still complaining to this day about the CFP this year, knowing he's also lost to a 3-loss team. He's also a 3-loss team that lost to Kentucky, who is not even a bowl team, by the way, to the aura of invincibility announcers, especially from SESPNC, talking about the merits of Indiana in the CFP, who, by the way, lost by less to Ohio State than that other SEC team, Tennessee, did in this whole entire tournament. In the SEC, it just means more, even to us when they fall flat on their damn face, guys.
Anthony, go ahead. I'll wrap this up.
Yeah, and it's interesting that some interesting things I pulled out online. Georgia obviously losing 20-10 last week to Notre Dame. They haven't won a college football playoff game since 2021-2022 when they were national champions. No, for the first time since 2005, no SEC player was in the Heisman Trophy top 10 in voting. Rabbi, you mentioned the SEC's bowl record is 8-6. 1-4 against the Big Ten this bowl season, and here's the thing too.
And the one is Iowa, so it doesn't count.
Yeah. So and you look at the team, the last SEC team that's remaining is Texas. They're literally the new kid on the block as far as the SEC conference. But you got the stalwarts like the Alabamas, the Miami's, the Ole Miss, and Georgia. I mean, it's like we talked about that. Just been some in years bias in the SEC because it's a tough conference, and at least this year, I think it's been like the Metropolitan Division, the NHL. It just cannibalizes itself. Like teams are just so good, they beat up on one another, and by the time you get to the end of the season, you wonder, okay, who's left and what's left. But and you see the other teams kind of picking up the scraps at that point, and picking a point with whichever team is remaining. But yeah, I mean, it was silly to see the Paul Feinerbrooms and Sabans of the world kind of going about their rants about how Alabama should have gotten in, but then it's like, well, Alabama, you probably shouldn't lose to an unranked team or what the bet
multiple unranked teams, by the way.
Yeah, multiple unranked teams, and then decide, yeah, we're gonna schedule Mercer late in the season, to try to boost our win-loss record and see how that goes. But I mean, look, for me, I just look at it like this. Maybe it's a downhill for the SEC, or maybe it's something that I felt like really the real reason Nick Saban left coaching, because now you have NILs kind of coming into play, and you see these colleges. You know what? You're not going to get over. You're not always going to get the best high school recruits anymore. I don't have to go to Alabama to play on the national grand stage when I know I can make more money for NILs playing someone else, and I can actually play on a similar grand stage. So I think that is kind of part of level the playing field as far as recruiting. You know, you don't see the SEC colleges because they play on they play on the biggest stages and kind of get the favorable primetime schedule games. Getting all the top athletes anymore. I think that's part of it. And also you see in conference realignment too. I think that's a big part of it as well. You see you just seen a lot. It's a change in the college football environment, and the SEC isn't going to be as dominant as we've seen in years past. I think because of that, and I think this season we're starting to see kind of a reflection of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to wrap it up, and I'm gonna kind of echo and tack on to a couple of the major points that each of you made. Y'all know I've never been a fan of the SEC. Their whole center of the college football universe attitude, which begins and ends with Commissioner Greg Sankey, is beyond arrogant to me. So I took more than a little bit of petty pleasure in seeing Tennessee and Georgia, a pair of OG SEC blue blood programs, not only get beat in the CFP quarterfinals, but get their asses handed to them by a pair of OG blue blood Midwest programs in Ohio State and Notre Dame. I know the conference still has a representative in Texas, but their Big 12-ness still hasn't completely disappeared as far as I'm concerned, especially since they needed 2 overtimes to beat Arizona State. They're 6-point underdogs for the upcoming game against the Buckeyes, and deservedly so. I also took more than a little pride in seeing mighty Alabama, who I never thought deserved to be in the 12-team CFP field to begin with, ranked number 11 in the nation, get beat by Michigan to both, as the rabbi said, start and end the 2024 calendar year. I think the one that ended the year is going to sting much worse for them due to each team's roster composition, as the much more shorthanded Wolverines were a 16.5-point underdog for the ReliaQuest Bowl game. Add to that, Illinois as a 9-point underdog, knocking off 15th-ranked South Carolina. And the Big Ten is 4-1 versus the vaunted SEC in this year's CFP/bowl game slate, which also includes 7-6 USC knocking off Texas A&M in the Las Vegas Bowl. And all of that should finally shut up every CFP media pundit, every SEC apologist, and every Twitter troll. Yeah, I'm talking directly to you, Kirk Herbstreit, and you, Paul Feinbaum, and yeah, you, Lane Kiffin. Not to mention the fans who ranted and raved and raged against the committee for daring to leave the Tide and all the other SEC teams out of the field. Y'all need to shut up and not post on social media for a while. Yes, overall, college football is better with a deep and highly ranked crop of SEC schools with legit CFP resumes, as it brings eyeballs from both fans and haters alike. But this isn't the early days of the new century when the SEC was the dominant conference in college football. With realignment, the Big Ten has gotten better and deeper. They're more than just Ohio State now, and both the regular season and the postseason has shown that. With NIL and the transfer portal, programs in the other conferences have been able to get the talent needed to improve themselves year over year to be competitive enough to make the playing field a lot more level than it's been since the start of the new century. SEC teams can no longer hoard loads of 4- and 5-star recruits further down the depth chart and continuously roll them out like products on an assembly line. The SEC wants its crown back. Well, they're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way, earn it, because the days of them getting their way purely by invoking their reputation and playing the whole "we're the SEC, that's why" card, well, that's over, and I, for one, am absolutely ecstatic about it.
Let's be fair, though. Ohio State spent a shitload of money on their team. They haven't earned anything in terms of how much they have actually spent on their team. It's really has the biggest
That's not what I'm talking about when
I know you are, but I'm just telling you that the team that could possibly win the national title this is not the Michigan team that was really together for so many years. Ohio State is a group of mercenaries.
State is truly representative of the current era of college football that we are in.
Mercenaries.
And look, they recognize the change in the rule book. Of course. They adapted. That's what you have to do.
Yeah. And like I said, though, the SEC is still at least one of the top 2 forces out there. And I think we've seen this year, though, cannibalization sometimes is not the greatest thing in the world. But fuck Greg Sankey. That's all I would have to say, really, to end this. And that ends our show. For Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait and our special guest, Joe Tufaro, I am the unwanted guest, Stephen Rabinowitz. Social Roundup, youtube.com/on the sports lines on demand. If you watched us live tonight on facebook.com/on the sports lines. Thank you. And Jay.
Our Twitter handle is at ONTH Sports Lines, where you'll find a link to each new show like tonight's, along with tidbits and nuggets from the world of sports that we think are worth your time to check out. This week, I'm going to shamelessly promote our year-end award show, which we did back on December 30th to close out the year in sports that was 2024. It was a really fun show full of special guests, great conversation, and some cool awards. If you didn't get a chance to check it out over the New Year's weekend, head over to our YouTube channel. The Rabbi just gave you all the URL, and give it a look.
We'll see you next week. Possibly a little birdie told me maybe next Thursday for more football, and good night and football.
Good night, everyone.
Everybody.